Konnichiwa everybody, the Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend, and just like we did for the Australian and Chinese Grand Prix, we're getting all of our Japanese Grand Prix content put together in this compilation video for you to check out. The timestamps are in the description if you're viewing this on YouTube to skip to the part that you're most interested in. We go through our 5 drivers preview, the most memorable moments over the years here in Japan, the most successful drivers around Suzuka, and we also go in depth with analysing the new one-off liveries for both Red Bull and Haas that they are, of course, sporting this weekend too. So yeah, without further ado, guys, let's dive in. The Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend, guys. Suzuka Japan hosts round 3 of the Formula 1 World Championship and gets us underway for this triple header as we head into the Middle East after that. But let's focus on the land of the rising sun. Let us focus on the drivers that I'm going to be paying special attention to during this race. And where else are we going to start other than with Yuki Tsunoda? So for those who have been living under a rock and missing all of my recent videos, Yuki Tsunoda is now a Red Bull Racing driver. He has swapped seats with Liam Lawson after the opening 2 rounds of the season. Tsunoda goes into his home race, which I would have highlighted for him anyway, but I absolutely have to highlight him now because he has a genuine chance of a very good result this weekend to please the home crowd. Now, Tsunoda has said that the RB21 is not that difficult of a car to drive, despite the fact that the likes of Lawson and Perez historically have really struggled in that Red Bull second seat. He sounds confident. I hope it works out for him. I hope he gets at least points in his home race. Historically, this hasn't been the best track for him. He was beaten here by Lawson, ironically, when they were both driving for AlphaTauri in 2023. I hope he's going to do well, but honestly, with how difficult of a track Suzuka is, I am not ruling out some sort of incident with him just being a bit lackluster, like Lawson has been in that car too, but we'll see what happens there. I did mention Lawson there, and of course I have to highlight him as well. He's going to be one of the guys that we're going to be looking at this weekend. How is he going to react to being demoted after just 2 rounds? It's going to take a bit of belief and self-confidence, really, to be able to get back on track when it comes to that. His confidence was clearly knocked by that Red Bull Racing car. I've already had my say on whether I think it was the correct decision to demote him or not. Personally, I don't think it was. No disrespect to Tsunoda. I'm very happy the fact he's in a Red Bull car, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of pressure on Tsunoda now to perform, and also on Liam Lawson as well. We've seen drivers be demoted and go on a bit of a downward spiral since then. Think of Daniel Kvyat back in the day. It took him a long time to recover, and even then he never truly recovered to what he was before. So yeah, I'm a bit fearful for Lawson, but this is a track he knows very well. He's raced here in F1, he's raced here in Super Formula as well over the years, so I think he's going to do quite well. But yeah, if he gets beaten by Hadjar, I think it's going to be a big confidence hit that he's going to take, really. It's going to be difficult for him. Speaking of difficult, though, Fernando Alonso, he's had a difficult start to the year, to say the least. His teammate Lance Stroll, who is constantly mocked online for his lack of performance, has managed to score points in both of the opening rounds of the season. Fernando Alonso, meanwhile, is the only one of the 20 Formula 1 drivers to not be classified, retiring in both of the opening rounds of the season. He spun off in Australia due to the wet conditions, and he retired in China after just a few laps due to his brakes being on fire. I hope Japan at least is a weekend where he can continue, get some form back in himself. He's not been looking the quickest, in all truth, and even when the car has been on the track, it's not looked good. Although that Aston Martin is better than probably he was expecting it to be, but right now it's not really paying anything for him at the moment. It's not really doing well. I hope he's going to get at least points in the land where he has won twice previously back in the day, and also had some incredible overtakes as well. Look at his 2005 one on Michael Schumacher, 20 years ago now, that is. 20 years ago, wow. 2005 was 20 years ago. I still can't get over that fact. But yeah, I'm really hoping he's going to get a good result. The Spanish samurais, I like to call him. Let's hope for a points finish, at least for him this weekend. Let's talk about Ferrari, though. We have to talk about Ferrari. We have to highlight a Ferrari coming into this one. I'm going to highlight Sir Lewis, because this is a track where he's won 5 times in the past. If he manages to win this weekend, he will match Michael Schumacher's all-time record. Who else has won a lot of times around Japan? Look at my video that'll be out around the same time as this one, probably after actually, going over the most successful drivers in the history of the Japanese Grand Prix to get a lowdown on that. But yeah, double disqualification obviously in China, very bittersweet weekend for Ferrari and Hamilton, of course, because Hamilton had managed to win the sprint race before that on the Saturday. Hopefully during a Grand Prix distance his car is competitive, but honestly I'm a bit pessimistic about this Ferrari because I got a feeling just to avoid the double disqualification they might well run the car very conservatively as a result, but we'll see what happens, guys. I am optimistic they'll do better, but they literally got nothing in China in the Grand Prix, so it's hard not to do any worse. And let's talk lastly about Alexander Albon, up in 6th place in the championship in a Williams. Can he keep this form going? This is a much more technical track than China and also Australia. This in theory should be a track where Williams struggle, but they've been so good so far this year, have Williams, in particular in the hands of Alex Albon. Albon, I seem to remember as well, had a very good drive here for Red Bull back in the day. I'm sure he started back at the back of the grid. It would have to have been 2019, and I'm sure he came back for solid points, pulled off some incredible overtakes down into that chicane back in the day. So I'm hopeful he can do well. I'm not expecting too much from Williams personally. I think if they get any points from this event, it will be very good for them. But yeah, it's going to be a tough one for them, I think, because of the technicality and complexity of this track. But hey, they've surprised us so far of Williams. They're doing really well, and of course they are above Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship, aren't they? Yes, they are. Well, level on points, as it were, but above them 4th against 5th on countback. So yeah, we'll see what happens, guys, in this one. I'm really looking forward to this weekend's event. Who do you think is going to win, though? My money would definitely be on Oscar Piastri. I think he's going to come in with a lot of confidence. But then again, you know, Lando Norris, he's a great driver as well. So I think the McLarens are going to be the heavy favourites. But we'll see what happens. Maybe we could get a surprise 3rd winner in 3 Grand Prix this weekend. Let's see. Max Verstappen, of course, has won the previous 3 in a row. The 2025 Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend. So ahead of this weekend's event, guys, let's have a look at some fast facts for the Suzuka Japan event. As many fast facts as I can get through in less than 5 minutes on the channel. You know how we do here, and let's dive into them now. Let's not waste any time in this video. So Suzuka Japan holds the distinction of being the only circuit we race at on the Formula 1 calendar that is laid out in a figure of 8 configuration. After the Degner curves, the circuit passes under the straight leading to the 130R. Owing to this, it's the only F1 track that runs both clockwise and anti-clockwise. This figure of 8 layout is beneficial for tyre wear. It creates a more even balance between the left and the right hand corners, 10 being to the right and 8 being to the left, distributing the load more equally between the tyres. The first corner doesn't require any braking on entry. In qualifying, drivers don't hit the brakes until the car is cornering at close to 5G. That is 5 times the force of gravity pulling on your body, aka a lot. That helps generate some of the highest steering wheel torques of the entire season. The vast majority of the first sector at Suzuka is spent cornering. From turn 1 until the exit of turn 7, the steering wheel is moving almost continuously for nearly 2 kilometers of the lap. So basically it never straightens out for almost 2 kilometers. That's incredible. For 2025, parts of the track between turn 1 until the entry of turn 8 have been resurfaced, so expect some faster times through those sectors. Just 1.2 kilometers of the lap is spent driving in a straight line. Most of the 5.807 kilometers see some lateral G-force going through the car, basically giving the drivers no brake either. The lack of straights also means that Suzuka is one of just 4 circuits on the calendar that has only one DRS zone between turn 18 and turn 1. The 130R is one of Formula 1's quickest corners, taking at least 295 kilometers an hour. That's about 190 miles an hour. Turn 11, meanwhile, is one of the slowest on the calendar at 60 kilometers. That is, of course, the hairpin, one of the main overtaking spots, particularly if your name is Kamui Kobayashi. The braking zone for turn 11 is particularly challenging. Drivers must hit the brakes midway through the turn 10. They are cornering at close to 3.5G while turning right before the hairpin. Lockups there are very common. Suzuka has one of the highest mass sensitivities of the season. That means that the cars that carry more fuel are penalised more in terms of overall lap time and performance. Suzuka has hosted the F1 season finale on 6 occasions, and up until 2022 appeared in the latter stages of the calendar, but for 2023 onwards, it's now one of the first races. For the past 2 seasons, the race has taken place in April, in the middle of the famous Japanese cherry blossom season, and of course Haas have a celebratory livery for that as well this season. All 6 of Mercedes' win in Japan came in consecutive seasons between 2014 and 2019. Mercedes clinched a record equaling 6th consecutive constructors title at Suzuka in 2019. Max is aiming to become the first driver to win 4 consecutive Japan Grand Prix at Suzuka. His 3rd straight win last year matched Michael Schumacher's run from 2000 to 2002. If you want to see who's won the most Japanese Grand Prix of all time, there's a video out already going over that, most likely on the channel, of course. Yuki Tsunoda makes his Oracle Red Bull Racing debut this weekend at the same venue that Max made his first ever appearance in Formula 1 when he took part in FP1, aged just 17 years and 3 days in 2014. Finishing 10th in Suzuka last year, Yuki became the first Japanese driver to score points in their home race since Kamui Kobayashi's famous podium in 2012. Max reached 3,000 career laps led whilst on his way to securing victory in Japan last season. Only 3 other drivers in F1 history have matched such a feat: Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and of course Michael Schumacher. Suzuka has been the home to 3 of the team's championships clinching performances. Max's victory in 2022 and 2023 secured the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship a year later. Seb also defended his driver's crown here in 2011. Just correct a simple mistake I made before. 2024 was the first race where we had Japan early on in the season. 23, of course, that had a late one. The Japanese Grand Prix has been on the Formula 1 calendar ever since 1987. In fact, there were a couple of races in the 1970s as well. The race has been primarily hosted at Suzuka, but also at Fuji as well. Now, with that in mind, this is also a venue where we've seen plenty of championship deciders over the years. Traditionally, this is either the last race or one of the last races of the season, and we've seen a lot of championship deciders here. I think it might actually hold the record for the most championship deciders being held at a particular Grand Prix and or a certain circuit in Formula 1 history. So with that in mind, guys, it's very hard to narrow this down to just 5 moments, but I'm going to do that here on the channel, guys. I hope you agree with my moments, and of course there are so many more. I can't go through them all, but I'm going to go with 5 of the best in my opinion. So I did allude to it there, the 1976 championship decider. People who know their Formula 1 history, and people who have also watched the movie Rush, will know all about it. We were heading to the final round in Japan, the first ever Formula 1 championship Japanese Grand Prix being held at Fuji in, I think it was probably October time by then, and because of that time of year it was extremely heavy rain. In modern day times this race would never be run, but this race was being televised across the entire world, something that was a really novel concept in Formula 1 at the time. I don't think it had ever been done before, in fact. But yeah, an incredible decider between James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Lauda dominated the early stages of the 1976 season, but of course had a horrific accident at the Nürburgring that injured him severely. He was lucky to escape with his life, let alone come back a couple of races later for an incredible comeback at the Italian Grand Prix. Hunt had built up a championship lead in that time, but Lauda slowly clawed it back, and going into this race there wasn't a lot between them. Because of the torrential conditions, Niki Lauda actually withdrew from the Grand Prix after a few laps, meaning that James Hunt didn't need to win the race to win the championship. He was leading the race in the early stages, but he suffered a puncture that set him back all the way to 3rd, which he just about managed to hold on to and win his one and only world championship as a result. Lauda, of course, would come back in 1977 to win the championship in that year, and would later come back out of retirement to win a championship for the 3rd time in 1984. Truly a legend of the sport. And speaking of legends, our second moment is where 2 of the greatest Formula 1 drivers of all time, both GOAT contenders in my opinion, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost in 1989. Now these 2 were gunning for the championship. The year prior, in 1988, Senna completed an incredible comeback to win his first Formula 1 world title. But in 89 it was advantage Alain Prost. And it was advantage Alain Alain Prost from the start as well, as he led in the early stages. If Prost won the race, then Senna would lose out on the championship, so he had to overtake his championship rival and McLaren teammate. He saw his opportunity late in the race and dove down the inside, heading into the chicane. Prost closed the door. Some say unfairly. In my personal opinion, I think we all know that Prost knew what he was doing. Prost's car ironically was undamaged, but he decided to retire from the race anyway. However, Senna, despite the damage to his front wing, did continue. He had to stop late in the race and replace that wing, and he fell behind Alessandro Nannini, who led the race. However, Senna did manage to get back and overtake the Italian. Senna believed that he won the race and therefore was still in with a chance of winning the World Championship. However, he was extremely controversially disqualified for being perceived to receive a push start and cutting the chicane as a result. That very much did mean that he was disqualified from the race. Again, extremely controversially. Anybody who's seen the Senna movie will know all about that, and I'm sure it had nothing to do with Jean-Marie Berlest and, of course, Alain Prost being good friends and compatriots. I'm sure it didn't at all. But yeah, that meant that Prost very controversially won the 1989 World Championship. Speaking of controversial championship deciders, 1994. Now, of course, this race did not decide the 1994 World Championship, but it could have done. Michael Schumacher led the World Championship, and if he won the race, then he would have won the World Championship. But he had to stave off an incredible Damon Hill during this race as well. Now, the race did start in torrential rain conditions and was red flagged early on. Now, under the rules of Formula 1 at the time, the race would therefore be decided on aggregate. On the aggregate time, Schumacher had an advantage of 6.8 seconds over Damon Hill. Hill led the majority of the Japanese Grand Prix from that point, but he needed to get a lead of bigger than that margin to actually win the race. And even though they weren't racing directly on the track, they were racing in terms of time gap, and who had the advantage overall on aggregate did vary throughout the race. Like I said, this was run in absolute torrential rain conditions. It would never be run nowadays in modern Formula 1, and it was great to see these two fantastic drivers duke it out on the track. In the end, it was Hill who famously, according to Murray Walker, 3.3 seconds over the line. He did his commentary. He had the advantage overall after the aggregate time was subtracted. So that did mean that Hill and Schumacher headed into the final race in Australia pretty close to one another, and both have a chance of winning the World Championship. And we all know what happened in Adelaide a few weeks after that. That's a video for another day, and actually I did cover that in my 5 moments from Australia video a couple weeks back if you've not seen that. It's just taking longer than I thought it was going to do, but we've got championship deciders to describe at the end of the day, and we got another one, the year 2000. Mika Häkkinen against Michael Schumacher. Häkkinen had won the previous two championships in 1998 and 1999, and Schumacher got pole position yet again heading into this race. Now, traditionally Häkkinen had beaten Schumacher off of the line in both of those previous Grand Prix, and did the same thing again here too. He got a storming start to take the lead heading into turn 1. This was the penultimate round of the season, and Häkkinen had to win it to have a chance of taking the championship to the final round in Malaysia next after this, but it didn't get that far thanks to a storming drive by Michael Schumacher. He put some incredible pace in to win the race by overtaking Häkkinen through the pit stops. And this is such a special race as well, because at the end of the day, even though Michael Schumacher had won a couple of world championships before, this was his first for Ferrari, his first of 5 for Ferrari, the first Ferrari drivers world champion in 21 years. Jody Scheckter was the previous person to manage that in 1979. I'm pretty sure this is Ferrari's longest dry spell in Formula 1. Even nowadays, it's not quite as long as what it was during this period, although it is getting close, of course. If they continue on this trend for a few years, they may well beat that unwanted record. But yeah, incredible stuff, really. Fantastic race. Really, really enjoyed that one, looking back on it. A great duel between two rivals that really, really respected and admired each other. They were fantastic. Were Michael Schumacher and Mika Häkkinen in late 90s, early 2000s. Brilliant drivers. The final one I want to mention, though, another Finnish driver doing an unbelievable thing around Suzuka. I've got to talk about Kimi Räikkönen in the year 2005. Now, Formula 1 YouTube channel has uploaded the final 15 laps of the Japanese Grand Prix from this year. I implore you go watch it after this if you want, because it was an incredible race. For me, probably the best dry race of all time in Formula 1. The racing action was incredible from start to finish. The grid was shaken up because it was wet qualifying and all kinds of funky strategies going on in qualifying. I think Ralf Schumacher ran a Toyota on fumes basically to get pole position, but we got to talk about Kimi Räikkönen because he went all the way around a track, by the way, which is very difficult to overtake. Suzuka is a very hard track to overtake at in Formula 1. But for him to go from, 16th place to first, to win it pretty much almost on the last lap with that daring move on Giancarlo Fisichella. Unbelievable stuff to manage that. It was such bravery, pure sisu, as the Finns would say with that one. Again, it's one of the greatest drives in Formula 1 history. I think Räikkönen had lost the 2005 World Championship by that point, so he had nothing to lose. But my goodness me, did he prove himself as one of the great contenders right there. And eventually, of course, he would get his championship in 2007, but not driving for McLaren, driving for Ferrari. But yeah, this was one of his, I'd say probably his best win, and one of the best wins in the history of Formula 1. He was absolutely unstoppable on that day. But which are your favourite memories of the Japanese Grand Prix? I've gone on for a long time with this. It's Japan. It's just an incredible track. One of my favourites. I absolutely love it. What's your favourite moment from Japan over the years in Formula 1? Your comments are always appreciated below, guys. The Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend, guys, and this is one of the most well-attended, one of the most incredible, one of my favourite events on the calendar. And that very much does go along with the fans as well. They absolutely love Formula 1. This is an event that has been well-attended ever since it went to Suzuka, and probably even back in the days of Fuji, back in the 1970s when we had a few races there. Now, with that in mind, surprisingly, there's not been that many Japanese Formula 1 drivers. There's only about 20 or so in total, which surprised me, to be honest, and there's not been that many that have been successful in the sport either. But with that in mind, we do of course have a Japanese driver currently on the Formula 1 grid and could well become the best Japanese driver of all time if he's not already there in some people's books. We'll get into him very shortly, but let's have a look at the top 5 Japanese Formula 1 drivers of all time. Now, before we get into this list, I want to give a little shout out to Ukyo Katayama, Shinji Nakano and Kazuki Nakajima. They don't make it into this top 5, but they all scored Formula 1 points over the years, so I thought I'd give them a little mention before we get into the top 5. Number 5 for me, though, has to be Nakajima. Now, the biggest surprise that I found while researching Satoru Nakajima is that he made his Formula 1 debut at the age of 34. Now, Formula 1 drivers back then did used to make their debuts a lot later than what we do now in the current era. Now, it's not unheard of now to have a teenager in the Formula 1 car. Back then, it used to usually be around your mid-20s, but to be in your mid-30s and make your F1 debut is surprising to say the least. He's made his debut in 1987 driving for Lotus, partnering a certain Ayrton Senna during that time. And in fairness to him, he did manage to get points every now and again during this time, a time when Formula 1 was very much stacked for talent that I believe it's not had since. The level of talent in the late 80s and early 90s in Formula 1 was absolutely unmatched. And of course, back in these days as well, only the top 6 used to score points. He would have got a lot more points if it wasn't for that. Now, he did stick around at Lotus in 1988 and 1989 as well, and he also raced for Tyrrell in 1990 and 1991, and in all the seasons that he competed, he scored points, which, given the form of those teams at that time, I think is pretty decent. Nothing too special in Formula 1, but it does make me wonder what would have happened if he got to Formula 1 early, because he won the Japanese Formula 2 championship a lot, 5 times in fact, and I think he could have done quite well had he gone to Formula 1 early. The first time that he he won the Formula 2 series over in Japan was back in 1981, so it wouldn't have been out of the realms of possibility for him to make a debut in 82. And then he's in his late 20s, so it's a different story then at that point. Ifs and buts do not make a good driver, so I'm going purely on his Formula 1 performances and I'm putting him in number 5 because of that. Number 4 on the list is Aguri Suzuki, one of the 3 Japanese drivers to stand on the podium in Formula 1 history. Now, you might recognise that last name. No, not from the car company. I don't believe he's associated with those guys, but from Super Aguri. Of course, he did run his own Formula 1 team in the late 2000s as kind of a Honda B team, but of course, he was a decent Formula 1 driver back in the day as well. He competed for the likes of Larousse, Footwork, Jordan and Ligier in the late 80s and mid 90s. And of course, he did get a podium in Formula 1 as well, like I said, very famously at his home race in Japan. Something that's a bit of a theme among Japanese drivers in Formula 1. If they did manage to get a podium, it was normally in their home race. So fair play to the guy at the end of the day. I have to give him props for that. And again, he did score points on other occasions for teams that were not really the best, if we're being totally honest. I mean, Larousse were not a great team back in the day, but he did manage to score points semi-regularly for them in 1990, so fair play to him there. But the fact that he got a podium does not put him above the guy I have in third place, someone who doesn't have a podium yet, but I am convinced that he is well on his way to doing so. It's the only active Formula 1 driver from Japan currently on the grid, and it's of course Yuki Tsunoda. Now, some people might put him a lot higher than third, and I totally understand that. I think he's absolutely on his way to be able to top this list. In fact, if he gets a podium for Red Bull this year, I think he goes to the top of the list automatically, again, above the two guys that I have ranked above him on this list. Now, of course, I think he's been very up and down in Formula 1. In 2021, when he made his debut, he came into the sport with a real bang at the end of the day, but very much tapered off as that season went on. Then he had a very difficult 2022. I think he was on the verge of being sacked, quite frankly, given the conduct of Red Bull in recent times. I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that could have happened. But on top of that as well, you know, he did recover 2023, 2024, some solid points finishes in there. He did a lot better. In fact, last year was his best season in Formula 1 overall. He finished 12th overall in the championship, 30 points to his name. Not quite beating his tally from his debut season, but he's in a Red Bull this time as Yuki. He's making his Red Bull debut this weekend in Japan. It's sure to be an incredible event. I hope it works out for him. And like I said, if he gets a podium, for me, he does go to the top of this list automatically. But the fact he doesn't have a podium yet and hasn't really come that close to getting one, I think the closest he did get a 4th place actually in Abu Dhabi in his debut season, but that's the closest he's come, and then that was because of some pretty unique circumstances, shall we put it, during that race. Not a controversial race at all, Abu Dhabi 21. But second overall on my list, someone who, to my knowledge, I think he's still racing actually, incredibly, almost at the age of 50, Takuma Sata. What a driver Takuma was back in the day. Only one podium to his name, like I said. I think that podium did come at the United States Grand Prix in 2003, I want to say, or was it 2004? Testing my Formula 1 memory now on this one. It was 2004. There we go. I got it second time around. He was very much outscored by his teammate Jenson Button, but Button, of course, we know is an incredible driver. He made his debut for Jordan back in 2002, but later moved on to BAR Honda. He did score points pretty regularly during that time for the team. Very much a driver that had a reputation for crashing. Not totally unwarranted, but I really liked Takuma. He did stick around, of course, for Super Aguri. That name comes up again in 2006, all the way to 2008 when the team unfortunately folded. But yeah, since then he's had an incredible career in IndyCar. He did win the Indy 500. When was it? 22, 21, something like that. The guy was well over 40 years of age. No, 2020. There we go. He was 43 years of age at that point and winning the Indy 500. The guy's an incredible competitor, and it's amazing he's still competing in motorsport to this day. I'd love to see him back in the Indy 500 if he's going to compete this year. I don't think he's fully announced that yet, but we will see what happens there. But top of the list, one of my favourite Formula 1 drivers. I think the most streets will never forget Formula 1 driver of all time, Kamui Kobayashi. Now, I know the results don't really line up to a top level Formula 1 driver, but this guy's overtaking ability was legendary. Weirdly, he didn't pull up any trees in his junior career. He came into Formula 1 late in 2009 for Toyota, just as they were pulling out of the sport. But he did an incredible job in Formula 1 when he made his debut. He was so difficult to pass. He scored solid points in Abu Dhabi, getting 6th place, only missing out on his debut points in Brazil the couple weeks before in 9th place there. And then did pretty solidly for a number of years for Sauber, in fairness, and got, of course, that very famous podium in 2012. Until Tsunoda scored points last year in Japan, that was still the most recent point-scoring position for a Japanese driver in their home race. Kobayashi was a master of overtaking. His banzai last-second dive bombs down the inside, especially into that hairpin around Suzuka, was absolutely fantastic to witness. If you saw it live, you'll know what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, say not the best driver by any means, but someone who really, really left an impact on you. And for me, he's my favourite Japanese driver of all time. I don't think Tsunoda's going to change that, to be honest, even if he does become the best. But the fact he's got a podium is just put him ahead of the likes of everybody else. And yeah, I think Tsunoda, if he, like I said a number of times, if Tsunoda does get a podium in Formula 1, I think he will go to the top of this list. But he's not got there yet, so Kobayashi for 2025 still tops the list. But yeah, who's your favourite Japanese Formula 1 driver of all time? Is it Yuji Ide? The less said about him, the better, of course. Let us know in the comments below, guys. The Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend, guys, and I'm really looking forward to this event. It's one of my favourite races on the calendar. The Suzuka circuit in Japan is one of my favourite in the world. It's an absolutely incredible venue that has hosted the Japanese Grand Prix ever since 1987, apart from a little break in the 2000s to go to Fuji. This event, though, does go back a lot further than that. I believe the first Japanese Grand Prix in the Formula 1 era was held in 1976, that famous championship decider between James Hunt and Niki Lauda at the Fuji circuit. But before we look forward to the event, let's have a look back. Let's have a look at the drivers who have had the most victories at the Japanese Grand Prix of all time and rank them in terms of their victories overall. And there's some familiar names on here. There's some guys that are on the current grid that could extend their win tally even further into 2025. So just before I get into this, let me just clarify, these are victories only in the Formula 1 World Championship era of the event. But shout out to Yoshikazu Tsunako and Motohara Kurosawa for winning the event multiple times back in the non-championship days in the 1960s and 1970s. The only the most successful Japanese drivers in the history of the event, albeit of course not in the Formula 1 era. Multiple winners in the Formula 1 era are Gerhard Berger, Ayrton Senna, Damon Hill, Mika Hakkinen and Fernando Alonso. But to get onto this list properly and get an in-depth dive, you got to get at least 3 victories on this tally overall. There are 4 drivers that have managed to do so, and the first and most recent of these is Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen has won this event 3 times on the bounce in the previous 3 years, and indeed he managed to clinch his 2022 World Championship at the event as well. Japan, I still think, holds the record for the most championship deciders, and some of those being very recent, and the most recent of them all been in 2022. Although the days of the Japanese Grand Prix being a title decider seem to be over now, as the round is pretty on early in the season. Verstappen has dominated this event in truth in the last 3 years. No one's really got close to him in that time, and yeah, if he continues that form, he's going to do very well this weekend. But his Red Bull car doesn't seem like it's quite what it was, so I don't think he's going to get 4 victories in a row. He currently matches Michael Schumacher for the only guy that's won 3 of these events in a row or more. If he manages to get 4, no one else has managed to do that. So that would be a record that Verstappen would break, although I don't think it's going to happen this week, and I'd be surprised, but at the end of the day, he's won 4 championships in a row for a very good reason. Red Bull, of course, doing very well around this track, and also in the hands of Sebastian Vettel, Red Bull got quite a few victories as well. He managed to win 4 times in 5 years, did Sebastian Vettel for Red Bull, back-to-back in 2009 and 2010, and also in 2012 and 2013. His favourite race around here probably, though, was the 2011 Grand Prix, ironically. Even though he didn't win it, he did win his World Championship, his 2nd championship overall. Kind of mirroring Max Verstappen, actually, thinking about it. That was his 2nd title in 22, wasn't it? So, interesting comparison there. Vettel never managed to win for Ferrari, though. Ferrari not as good in general around this track as others. Ferrari not having the most wins here, that being McLaren with 9 victories overall. And one of those victories for McLaren was Sir Lewis Hamilton back in the day. Although it wasn't at Suzuka, it was at Fuji in 2007 in some of the most torrential rain conditions I have ever seen in a Grand Prix. It seemed as though that 07 victory very much teed him up for his first World Championship in his rookie year, although the Chinese Grand Prix gravel trap by the pit lane did have other ideas when it came to that. Hamilton also won on 4 occasions for Mercedes, 4 times in 5 years between 2014 and 2018. The only time he didn't win was in the middle in 2016. Hamilton can join the top of this list with a victory this weekend, and given the fact that he won in the sprint in China, that is not out of the realms of possibility. possibility. But with 6 victories to his name, the most successful driver on this list in the Japanese Grand Prix history. I did mention him before when I talked about Max Verstappen and his 3 wins in a row. It's Michael Schumacher. Schumacher managed to win 5 times for Ferrari in 1997, 2000, 2001, 2002 and 2004, and he also won for Benetton back in 1995 as well. He managed to clinch his 2000 and 2003 World Championships at the event as well. That 8th place in 2003, clinching his 6th title overall in Formula 1 to become the most successful driver in the history of the sport, passing Juan Manuel Fangio's all-time, at the time, record of 5 World Championships. Schumacher was an ace around here. Even when he didn't win in the likes of 1998 and 1999, he was extremely quick and could have won if circumstances were different. But yeah, the most successful driver in the history event is Michael Schumacher. He did win a few times around Grand Prix, let's be honest here. So yeah, there we go, guys. Any surprises on that list? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And can Hamilton match Schumacher? Can Verstappen match Vettel? Can Fernando Alonso get up to 3 victories? No chance. Absolutely not. But we'd like to see it at the end of the day. That'd be definitely a big surprise. Who do you think is going to win the Grand Prix this weekend? Let us know in the comments below. The Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend, and I want to have a look at why this is such a special race on the Formula 1 calendar. Why Suzuka is such an incredible venue to watch racing at, and just give my thoughts on the overall event, because this is very much a cornerstone event of the Formula 1 calendar. It's been on the calendar continuously since 1987, except for a few seasons where, of course, we did miss due to the pandemic. And during that time, it has almost exclusively been held at Suzuka. Of course, we did race at Fuji between 2007 and 2008. There we go. And we also raced at Fuji as well a couple times in the 1970s as well, of course, famously hosting the title decider in 1976 between James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Watch the film Rush if you've never seen it before. Just watch the live broadcast of the race. It was an incredible event, really. But why is the Japanese Grand Prix so special? What makes it such an incredible event on the Formula 1 calendar? Well, for me, there are 3 main factors, I'd say, really, when it comes to this. The first is the circuit itself. So Suzuka is an absolute slalom of a track. I just did the fast facts, and basically for the entire first sector, apart from the very start of the straight, you don't really hold the steering wheel straight. It is constant corners. Every corner around this track is difficult. The S's are a onslaught of left, right, heavy G-forces that are laterally pulling your body from side to side. It absolutely eats the tyres for breakfast, and if you get it wrong in Suzuka, it's one of the few tracks on the calendar where there's not really that much runoff. If you go off, you're in the gravel, you're in the grass, and you're not coming back with at least some damage on your front wing or a lot of gravel chips in your actual car's vents, which is not ideal, of course. So it really, really does punish mistakes. I mean, even corners like the Degners, they're really, well, the first one's a really fast right-hander, and the second one's a very slow right-hander as well. The hairpin, again, even that, lockups are very, very common into there. It's very difficult. The spoon curve as well, that's a fantastic corner. Going through to the 130R, which, of course, these days is an easy flat corner, but you think about the forces that are going through these cars. They are apexing that corner at 190 miles an hour, are the F1 cars. They are absolutely on rails around this track. It's fantastic to see. It does mean that overtaking is difficult around here, but at the end of the day, on top of that, you got to also kind of put into perspective the fact that, overtakes are therefore, they're a lot more special. It's going closer to what we used to have back in the old days of Formula 1. There is a DRS zone here, like there is around every track, but there's only one of them, so it's not like it's easy to pass at all. So I do like that. It's kind of a throwback. And on that theme as well, the layout of Suzuka has remained pretty much unchanged since the 80s, since they first started racing here in Formula 1. It's not really changed. And since that's the case, you can really directly compare the performance of cars. I think the only change they've really done is that they reprofiled the 130R after Alan McNish had a really nasty crash in, I want to say 2002, in his Toyota. They reprofiled it then, but other than that, the track, apart from like the runoff areas and stuff, it hasn't really changed that much. So you can directly compare the likes of Senna to Schumacher to Hamilton in terms of how these cars perform. how they are, getting on the track. And, when it came to the point when, example, the 130R was, a flat corner eventually, and it wasn't always the case. You used to have to lift going into that corner back in the day, back when aerodynamics were not as complex. The weather as well is something we've got to talk about. There's been incredibly wet races around Japan, of course, over the years, which has made it a very dangerous track. Of course, did tragically claim the life of Jules Bianchi, rest in peace. But, for the most part, when there is bad weather here, it just become a real challenge. And I do like that about the track. It is a very, very difficult track, even in dry conditions. And in the wet, it becomes even more tough. Some of the wet races around here have been absolute all-time classics. Look at the 1994 race, for example. That was an absolutely incredible event. So that also adds into it. But we got to talk about the fans. Now, for me, the Italian fans and the British fans, they're some of the best in Formula One. The Italian fans have the most passion. The Brits, we really do show up in incredible numbers to Silverstone, despite it being a very, very expensive event to actually attend. But the Japanese fans, they're very unique. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of Yuki Tsunoda fans there this weekend. We used to have a lot of fans of the likes of Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher back in the day as well. I can imagine Max has a lot of fans out there right now in Japan as well, probably Hamilton too. But, you got to talk about the Japanese fans because they are absolutely unique in that they support everybody. Now, I don't mean that as in, they all support everybody. I mean that in the terms of there's always going to be a fan for somebody. Back when there was the days of the back markers, the true back markers, the likes of Mana and Lotus, Caterham, HRT, whatever they were called at that time, you would find fans of those drivers in the race. There will always be a fan for somebody. They are incredible, and that kind of support, that kind of that love and affection to every single one of the drivers is something that I don't think we really see on that kind of level anywhere else in the world. It's incredible to see. This has been an event that has always been really well attended. I looked up the attendance figures, even going back to the 1980s and 1990s. Back when Formula One, it was popular, but it wasn't as popular as what it is now. And it wouldn't be uncommon to see empty stands or empty parts of stands in a lot of European and South American and North American races in particular. Formula One in North America back in the day. Oh boy, camel races used to get more people attending them in Phoenix. True story. But Japan has always been really, really well attended. Hundreds of thousands of people flock into this track every single year to watch the Japanese Grand Prix. And, the fans really, really do make it cool. And something that's really nice as well, we do lose out on the fact that Japan is no longer a race where we'll ever see any more championship deciders unless it moves back to later in the year. But, back in the days when it was later in the year, you get all these championship deciders. That's really amazing to look back on the history of it. It's got so many incredible moments. I've tried to summarize it in my 5 moments thing, but it's tough. You could pick 20, 30 easy for Japan. But being early on in the year now, you do get the cherry blossoms in April, which, again, as if you're a fan wanting to attend the event from another country, it's another thing to kind of entice you to go. I'd absolutely love to go. It's top of my bucket list is Japan. I'd love to go in general, but to go and watch Formula One there, yeah, if I could do that too, that'd be awesome. See the cherry blossoms as well. Hell yeah, let's do it, man. But yeah, I could go on about Japan for a very long time. I think it's, without a doubt, one of the cornerstone events on the Formula One calendar, and it should be protected. Just like the British Grand Prix, the Monaco Grand Prix, Belgium, Italy. I know Belgium's not protected anymore, but that's what should be protected. I think it absolutely should be. And for me, honestly, it is one of only 2 events on the Formula One calendar outside of Europe where I'd be like, we need this event. If we don't have this race, it is not a Formula One World Championship. The other one, if you're wondering, in my opinion, is Brazil. You absolutely need a Brazilian Grand Prix, and I think you absolutely need a Japanese Grand Prix as well. But those are my kind of thoughts on it, guys. So the Japanese Grand Prix is on this weekend, and Haas have decided to honour this by bringing out a special one-off livery for the Suzuka event, and it's an absolute stunner. This could well be the best one-off livery in Formula One history. It's something that we do see quite a bit now. There are quite a few one-off liveries throughout a season for a lot of teams. I don't think Haas have ever done one for Japan before, and they've certainly never done one like this before. So of course, for those that don't know, April in Japan is cherry blossom season. This is the Sakura season, when you are most likely to see one of Japan's most famous hallmarks, really. If you ever go to Japan, April is one of the best times to do it, although it's very expensive to do it at that time of year for this very reason. It's very popular to go there for that reason. I'd love to go personally. It's definitely on my list for sure, and I'm glad that Japan's moved itself to this time of the year as well. Although I still miss the days when it was one of the last rounds of the season and had championship deciders, but then again, I'm just a bit old, I suppose, when it comes to that. But yeah, focusing back on Haas's livery here, they've absolutely done an incredible job. The way they've revealed it as well, I think, has been very nice. The promo images, and I'll put some of them on the screen as I'm talking as well, guys, just so you don't miss out on them. But yeah, basically, they just revealed it so that it looks like the car has been sat under a cherry blossom tree for a little bit, and the cherry blossoms have just rained down on them, just those little pink leaves. And then the more you look at it though, the more detail you see, and the hard work they've actually put into to make this. So the general Haas livery, for those that saw the livery reveal video I did a while ago from F1 75 Live, whatever it was called, you know, I didn't really rate Haas that highly because it's a standard Haas livery. It's white, black and red. It's a newspaper. It's just kind of average. It's not bad, but it's not great either. It doesn't really stand out. It's not something you're going to look back and think, that Haas livery in 2025, that was a good one, guys. What a classic that was. Let's bring that back. You know, no one's going to be saying that, but I tell you what, they're going to really want to bring this back, though. This Japanese one-off livery is absolutely incredible. It's got some of the most beautiful flowers on there as well, all in pink. They've made the Haas logo pink. They've put highlights that are pink. I mean, it's the same base livery, but it's just exemplified. It's amplified. That's the word I'm looking for. An incredible job by the graphic design team over at Haas to do this. They've even put the numbers for Behrman and Ocon in like a Japanese kind of font as well, you know, and put the pink leaf underneath it as well. I think it's a really, really good job by them. This could well be the best one-off livery in F1 history. I know it's a relatively recent trend. We've not seen that many of them, of course, over the years. But, you know, like I say, they're a bit hit and miss for me. You guys know that when I review these one-off liveries, I'm not usually a massive fan of them. I do think, what's the point? It's just a marketing exercise. Like Racing Bulls or RB's jeans thing they had in... was it Singapore? I think it was Singapore. Last year, I was like, this is just obviously a marketing tool, clearly. But this isn't marketing anything. This is just purely celebrating the fact they're going to Japan, Sakura season, Sakura time, cherry blossom time for everybody else. You know, it's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, guys, rate it 1 to 10 in the comments. For me, this is getting at least a solid 9 out of 10. I don't think you could do much better, really, with a livery than this. Your thoughts in the comments below. What's the best one-off livery of all time? Is it this, or is it something else, like some of the McLaren Gulf ones we've seen over the years as well? So I made a video yesterday going over Haas and their one-off livery for this weekend's Japanese Grand Prix. Now, in that video, I said that this is probably the best one-off livery ever, in my opinion, in Formula 1. It's a relatively recent trend. We've not seen it for that many years. There's not been that many one-off liveries, but they're becoming more and more popular. Just like one-off helmets for the drivers, these one-off liveries do celebrate certain things for particular teams. Now, there were rumours about Red Bull coming to Japan with a one-off livery, and a lot of people were joking, including myself, saying, well, it's just going to look like the Racing Bull then, because the Racing Bull has a one-off, well, not a one-off look, it's of course going to be like that all season. But they have like a similar look to what Red Bull did a couple of years ago with their one-off Japanese livery, the White Bull, as it were. You know, but honestly, this livery is absolutely incredible. I love it. They've designed one that's based on the old Honda liveries from back in the day. Was it the RA0001 or something like that? I can't remember the exact car number, but they actually do show it in one of the shots as well when they promoted this, did Red Bull, just in the kind of background, because of course this is going to be Red Bull's final Japanese Grand Prix with Honda power. So presumably next year they won't do something like this. I'd be shocked if they did. Although of course it does look like the Japanese flag. It's all white with the red circle there for the driver number for both Tsunoda and Max Verstappen. But yeah, it's very simple. It's mainly a white livery, some black highlights here and there, some red highlights here and there. Red for the Red Bull, of course, and the driver number, and all the sponsors are in a simple black color as well. And obviously on the black parts of the car, the sponsors are in white. It is very simple. It is very effective. It looks fantastic. I really, really like this, and I'm not going to say it's the best. I would still prefer Haas's because Haas's is more unique. You know, Red Bull have done this before, of course. That doesn't diminish what they've done, but I'm just saying we've seen this before. But this is probably the best look they've actually gone for of Red Bull. This is probably the best looking Red Bull, I would say. And they're a team that do come under a lot of fire for the lack of invention and the lack of dynamism in the change of their livery, which I totally get. But at the end of the day, you know, it's Red Bull. It's a mobile drinks can advert. That's what it is. I mean, they obviously represent more than that. They're a great Formula One team, have won races and championships, but ultimately they are a marketing machine, so naturally their Formula One car will look like a can of Red Bull. It's only natural. It's just the way it is, just like a lot of other teams have the look of certain sponsors. And thankfully that stake one-off livery is not real. It can't be. That has to be an April Fool's joke, surely. I'll try and find it and put it on the screen for you guys. But yeah, that is not real, surely. I mean, if they roll out of the car, looking like a sirloin, I think questions will be asked. But I'm pretty sure Stake aren't doing that to Sauber. But yeah, what do you think about this livery, guys? Which is the better one, Haas or Red Bull? I'm going Haas, but honestly, it's like an 8.5 out of 10 this for me, and the Haas is like a 9. There's not a lot in it, and it's really down to your personal preference at the end of the day. Haas, for reference, I've done like a cherry blossom livery with all the pink petals and highlights on the car, which look absolutely fantastic. See, Alpine, that is how you do a pink car, or a car with pink highlights, right? Look at what Haas have done. They've done a really good job of it. You haven't. But yeah, anyway, enough ranting. See you soon for some more content like this, guys. Like, share, comment, subscribe if you want to see more like this and support the channel. And yeah, have a fantastic day ahead with a great Japanese Grand Prix with at least 2 one-off liveries, possibly 3 if Sauber is actually going around as a mobile stake. I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. That has to be an April Fool's joke.